This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal. For anyone who might like to call in after the break, the number is 717-300-1698. 717-300-1698. Well, the change just continues at a breakneck pace, where President Trump is fulfilling more of his campaign promises, initiating the building of a wall with Mexico, defunding sanctuary cities, rebuilding infrastructure, manufacturing, working toward energy independence. During his very first day, he fulfilled 3 of the promises he had made: to end government funding of international Planned Parenthood and other overseas pro-abortion groups, with which personally I happen to disagree; withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which immediately won Trump unanimous approval and support from labor unions, with which I wholeheartedly agree; freeze all hiring in the federal workforce, which I think is certainly an appropriate intermediate step, and he's, of course, moving forward in relation to issues relating to illegal immigration. He's issuing executive orders that are going to drastically reduce the U.S. role in international organizations and end some treaties. The first of 2 draft orders, entitled Auditing and Reducing U.S. Funding of International Organizations, calls for terminally funding for any United States agency or other international body that meets any one of several criteria. It was not immediately clear if NATO is also among those targeted organizations. They include organizations to get full membership to the Palestinian Authority or Palestinian Liberation Organization, or support programs that fund abortion, or any activity that circumvents sanctions against Iran or North Korea. The draft order also calls for terminating funding for any organization that is controlled or substantially influenced by any state that sponsors terrorism, or is blamed for the persecution of marginalized group or any other systematic violation of human rights. Here, I'm troubled because it's such an obviously pro-Israeli and unfair to Palestinians attitude to target organization to give full membership to the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That troubles me a great deal. It's evident that Trump is willing to team up with Vladimir Putin to fight ISIS, that he's willing to work with Russia or anyone else when the U.S. has a shared national interest to beat the terrorist group, his press secretary told reporter Sean Spicer. Said the new U.S. president would only send troops and money into a country if it was of benefit to the U.S. economically, as well as on the national security front. This is a welcome measure because we need to end the wars in the Middle East, which interestingly are being fought on behalf of Israel. It's terribly striking that the Donald is very favorable to Israel when these wars were a consequence of 9/11, which actually sprang from the fertile imagination of Bibi Netanyahu to devise a way to draw the United States into taking out the modern Arab states that served as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the entire region. We know the plan from General Wesley Clark, who reported that when he returned to the Pentagon after serving as commanding general of Allied Forces Europe, meaning the CG of NATO, he learned from another general that the U.S. was planning to take out the governments of 7 countries in the next 5 years, beginning with Iraq and Libya, ending with Syria and Iran. Obviously, things have bogged down in Syria because of Russian intervention, but it's not been for lack of trying. And there will come a point, I think, where the Donald may be confronted with the stark dilemma of, his support for Israel on the one hand and his desire to end these ongoing wars in the Middle East, His instinct for ending the wars is completely well-founded, costing the American taxpayer trillions of dollars, and getting no return to American society, no benefit whatsoever. But when he pieces two and two together to realize that Bibi Netanyahu was the inspiration, where he'd already conducted a conference in Jerusalem and published a book about terrorism, how the West can win, already in 1987, before the thought was in anyone's mind. It's very clear that the neocon agenda, especially being promoted by the Project for a New American Century, was to engage the United States in these endless wars on the pretext that if the United States entered that geopolitically sensitive region and exerted military and diplomatic pressure outward, it could establish a new American empire worldwide that would endure for the next 100 years. I believe now that was a complete myth, that the whole idea was simply get the U.S. in there to fight these wars on behalf of Israel, that there would be no benefit to the United States, no 100-year empire, that was just pure propaganda. But that the Donald has shown a willingness to engage with Putin to take out ISIS, which, as I've explained many times, was made in the USA, where Iraqi army shot down 2 UK cargo planes delivering supplies to ISIS. The Iraqi Popular Forces shot down an American helicopter doing the same a week later. Well, we have photographs of ISIS members sporting U.S. Army tattoos, where the hacked files of an aide to Senator John McCain showed the videos of the taping of the propaganda pieces of the ISIS beheadings on a soundstage in Tel Aviv or even Hollywood, where you can go online and look for photographs of John McCain with al-Baghdadi, or John McCain with the head of ISIS, where al-Baghdadi is the head of ISIS. And you'll find them by the handful, and where in Washington, D.C., ISIS is known as John McCain's Army, where ISIS was created by an action of the Defense Intelligence Agency in 2012 when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and Barack Obama was president, as Judicial Watch was able to discover through Freedom of Information Act requests. But now that Donald is willing to work with Putin, with the Russians, to take out ISIS, which has gotten completely out of control, that is a very good move. We know, of course, if you're following the news, that his executive orders in enabling the construction of the proposed border wall and targeting sanctuary cities is met with fierce resistance by mayors and activists who are revolting against his Muslim ban executive order. I mean, this was to, control the immigration from the Middle East, banning all immigration from Syria, and restricting immigration from 6 other predominantly Muslim countries, which I think is very appropriate. I had no problem from the beginning with Donald's suggestion that we ought to have a temporary ban on immigration. Then he did it in terms of Muslims, when he ought to have done it in terms of the Middle East. In other words, using as the criterion the region rather than the religion. And where he's made as an exception to the ban those who are fleeing religious prosecution. We had the event yesterday that the State Department senior management resigned en masse altogether. This was like all the highest political appointees of the State Department. Frankly, that's not a bad thing, because Donald was going to have to replace them anyway. Bearing in mind that these people had been working for Hillary Clinton, they had to be familiar with, if not complicit in, her pay-for-play agenda, where the Clinton Foundation is now in the process of shutting its doors, where the Clinton Global Initiative has had to fire 22 members of its staff, where the game is over because since Hillary did not become president, there's no play in return for pay. I have compared her as a political version of of a prostitute who provides sexual favors in return for money. Hillary was providing political favors in return for money, which made her a political prostitute, or more bluntly, a political whore. I think that's exactly the case. We have a report from Robert David Steele in relation to Donald as the accidental president, that he's facing a two-pronged attack by his opponents, one led by entrenched neocon bureaucrats, including former CIA and National Security Director Michael Hayden, former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff. Bush family loyalists are seeking to call the shots on who Trump appoints to senior national security, intelligence, foreign policy, and defense positions in his administration. They are attempting to convince the Donald that he must maintain the Obama aggressiveness and militancy toward Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and other countries. The second front arrayed against Trump is from Soros-funded political groups and media. The second line of attack is a propaganda war, utilizing hundreds of anti-Trump newspapers, websites, and broadcasters that will seek to undermine public confidence in the Trump administration from the outset. Interestingly, several measures are being taken to constrain the influence of George Soros, which are totally appropriate and are going to have a great deal of effect. We know, of course, from the former Wall Street Journal reporter that George Soros had ties to more than 50 of the partners of the Women's March. That appeared to be a George Soros operation, not so much to promote women's rights as an anti-Trump campaign. That a new report from Wayne Madsen that Trump has quietly ordered Pompeo, who's the new head of the CIA, to sever all agency ties with George Soros. Under the administrations of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, it was not unusual for CIA station chiefs in capital cities around the world to coordinate political activities between Open Society Institute, OSI, civil society staffers, financed by hedge fund billionaire George Soros, and members of governments and opposition political parties. However, according to Wayne Madsen sources in Europe, all that ceased when Donald Trump's selection as CIA director Mike Pompeo took over the reins at the CIA. Trump ordered Pompeo to sever all CIA connection with Soros's multitude of non-government organizations. Most of these links were carried out via the U.S. Agency for International Development and the National Endowment for Democracy, longtime ciphers for CIA involvement with non-government organization activities abroad. A more recent U.S. government-funded entity, the U.S. Institute of Peace, has also carried out subversive operations in concert with the CIA. Well, you have to bear in mind that many of these institutions that are so much touted in the national press, the Agency for International Development, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the U.S. Institute of Peace, are in fact covert CIA assets in front. Soros likely saw his ties with the CIA coming to an end when, on the eve of Trump's inauguration, the hedge fund mogul lashed out at Trump as, quote, a con man, an imposter, and a would-be dictator. Soros was speaking at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Soros contributed $25 million to Hillary Clinton's unsuccessful presidential campaign. In addition, Trump's win in the resultant stock market rally cost Soros, a known stock market and currency speculator, around $1 billion in losses. The severance of links between the CIA and Soros, OSI, Open Society Foundation, and other NGOs in Eastern and Central Europe has been a hotbed of U.S. soft power projection directed against nationalist and pro-Russian parties, with the assistance of U.S.-funded broadcasters like Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty and the Voice of America, which are other CIA outlets, acting in concert with Soros-financed social media campaigns using Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, podcasts, mobile phone instant messages, online chats, Android and iPhone applications, and microblogs. Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty are vestiges of the Cold War, created by the CIA and repurposed after the fall of communism to extend American and NATO influence over nations extending from Poland and the Czech Republic to Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. Soros's OSI took over the archives of Radio Free Europe from the CIA and moved them from Munich to Prague. A number of political leaders in Eastern Europe and Eurasia, including the prime ministers of Hungary and Slovakia and the presidents of the Czech Republic, Serbia, and Macedonia, have complained about the coordination of activities on their soil between the CIA, Soros, and domestic opposition groups. It was this sort of coordination that led to an anti-democratic color revolutions in Georgia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and Macedonia that led to the ouster of democratically elected governments. In a more cloak and dagger move, the CIA, which has closely monitored groups acting against the activities of Soros and warned them of threats when necessary, has dropped that surveillance that Soros and his minions, Sorosites, are now fair game for intelligence agencies ranging from Budapest, Podgorica, and Bucharest to Chisinau, Minsk, and Skopje. George Soros may now have to make one more investment, the hiring of capable personal bodyguards. We have a Dutch regulator accidentally posting Soros's short positions, in other words, what he was betting was going to fall. And there's a petition for an international arrest warrant for George Soros. I encourage you to track down. Just look for a petition. Issue an international arrest warrant for George Soros, which I highly recommend supporting. One of the rather stunning recent notes is that Hillary Clinton is planning to run again in 2020 and launching a talk show. She'll host a talk show before 2020. I say fat chance. Clinton picked John Podesta as her Secretary of State, and of course Podesta was the key player in the Pizzagate scandals, of which there's masses of evidence that continue to come forward. Trump has decided to keep James Comey on as director of the FBI, which could be taken to mean that Hillary's going to get a walk, get out of jail free card, but I'm not so sure. After all, if you were going to crack down under a new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who may or may not have been confirmed as yet, Comey seems to know a great deal about the Pizzagate situation and all the emails. In addition, we have a further report that the Senate is going to investigate the FBI cover-up of illegal Clinton emails, which, as I believe I reported on Tuesday, is no doubt being, encouraged by the left, because I think they're going to show he acted improperly to harm Hillary. But the fact is he was covering it up. Where Judicial Watch again, and this has become a significant force in our society, is going to force an official damage assessment of Hillary's use of unofficial email accounts. In other words, Judicial Watch is asking for an accounting of how much damage was done here. By the way, further confirmation about the nature of John Brennan comes from Steve Pachinik, who may be, behind the termination of the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. I was convinced it was going to be an attack to take out the Donald at the inauguration using a nuke. It was the designated survivor scenario. We had the D.C. police ordered to shut off their body cameras. We had the Commander-in-General of the D.C. National Guard ordered by Barack Obama to stand down at 12:01 p.m. Eastern Time, which I said was parallel to Sheriff Bill Decker instructing his deputies not to provide any security for the Kennedy motorcade after it turned from Houston onto Elm and entered the kill zone. This appeared to be a perfect temporal analog of that geographical specification. And where when George H.W. Bush issued the statement that he had been advised by his doctor that were he to attend the inauguration in that cold January weather that he would not survive, meant, when you read between the lines, I was advised by my doctor, Henry Kissinger, that were I to attend the inauguration in that cold January weather, I would not survive because no one would survive. We had 2 radiation peaks in Washington, D.C. that morning. I was predicting with 100% confidence that this was going to happen. And in fact, that it didn't is because of an intervening variable that I haven't factored in, to wit, that operation behind the scene. We're going to stop it. This means that we have very, very sophisticated intel assets that have been operating on behalf of Donald Trump, keeping him alive and well. Part of what Steve Pachenik is reporting here is that it confirms Wayne Madson's previous report that John Brennan was a Saudi Arabian spy. And let me read some of what Pachenik has reported. Nothing betrays an incompetent spy like John Brennan as his insistence that Donald Trump apologize to the CIA for Donald's appropriate dismissal of the agency's intractable history of incompetence. Full disclosure, I'm not a fan of John Brennan nor any other of the civilian military DCIs except Admiral Stansfield Turner under Jimmy Carter, who correctly fired thousands of useless so-called CIA operatives. Mostly the CIA has been a part of Hollywood, creating absurd, self-aggrandizing movies, TV shows. Brennan was particularly good at concocting massive amounts of fictional narratives like the non-existent death of an already dead Osama bin Laden, the pathetic cover story for his incompetence regarding Hillary, CIA-inspired fiction regarding Benghazi, reconfirming the myth that it was part of the real Catholics in action. Increasing evidence has arisen that Brennan is really an effete, ruddy-faced Muslim convert. He became, like his Saudi Arabian counterpart, Huma Ahmad Abedin, a Salafist Muslim who made a Hajj to both holy cities of Mecca and Medina. It is unfortunate, but one of our premier intelligence operations has failed us as Americans. And I'll just say it's a good thing we're rid of him. I'll be right back. This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal. It's after the break, and we have a couple of callers. Barb in Florida, you're on the air. Barb? We have a second caller. You. Sure thing. We have a second caller, Rick, in the District of Columbia. Rick, how are you doing?
Very good, Dr. Fetzer. We talked a while back, beginning in 2012, and then in February 2016 about the 10 tips of talking to Trump. I traveled around Iowa a lot and saw him at 17 rallies, and shook Donald's hand 6 times and gave him posters 5 times, including topics of 9/11, the moon landing, and the TM technique. Which is
very good. What was your impression of the man on the stump?
Oh, that was great. Do you mean at the inauguration? Or
I meant when you had these encounters, during the campaign. I know you were at the inauguration, and I'm fascinated by your observations because even tonight we had a national network showing a photograph that had been taken well before the inauguration began to show that there was a smaller crowd, and it's just an outright form of deception. And because it's being done, what it means, Rick, is that the media is lying to the American people. I took 3 photographs, all from the inauguration issue of the New York Times, and put them in a blog as proof of the dishonesty of the mainstream press. Because there was one early on when there were lots of these white panels that were laid on the grass. Then another where most of them, but not all of them, were covered. And then the third, the most important, is that Donald was walking up to the podium, which just showed the place was packed all the way to the National Monument, the Washington Monument. What did you observe there on your own, personally?
Yeah, and there's a CNN photo, and since CNN is often critical of Trump, they find that photo credible, and I zoomed in. I was able to see myself making a video.
Oh, really?
On my Truth Makes Peace channel, if people want to see the video. And it was quite an exciting week. And when I went there on the Metro and came out, found there was a lot of protesters. And as I was walking to the, I got a red ticket from Senator Grassley, and I think I appreciate that. I think it's thanks to my being very active in Iowa on organizing Jefferson County, Trump-related activities, and carpools to see his events. And so when I was coming out to the red zone, mostly ladies were shouting in my ear, "You're a racist! You're a racist! He founded the KKK. He endorsed by the KKK." And I answered, "Well, the Democrats founded the KKK in 1865 against the Republicans who freed the slaves, including Republican Abraham Lincoln." And then once I got in, past the guards, and then had a check similar to what you do when you go through an airport metal detector. And I was very quiet and serene, and I could hear speakers starting. So it was visible through these large TV screens. So I felt I was able to tell what everybody was saying. And it was funny when Chuck Schumer started to speak, he got a lot of boos. And when Donald spoke, of course, there was a big cheer. So I enjoyed attending the inauguration very much. And there were other activities as well that people were going through. There was a few days before. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the Code Pink group organized a Trump Exposed event, and they had 6 speakers who were, talking down about Donald Trump and how racist he is and everything like that. So at one point, there was a lady who was the head of the National Organization of Women. She would say, "And you know what we have to do is stand up and speak out." So at that point, I stood up and spoke out. Donald directly saved us from World War III with Russia, and he's for peace. So I don't understand why everybody's protesting him. And so that was
right. If anyone was going to get us into war with Russia, it was Hillary Clinton. I mean, she is a warmonger. She was responsible for the slaughter of Libya. She promoted the Benghazi weapons transfer that led to the death of Chris Stevens. She was all for taking out Assad. She wanted to impose a no-fly zone even after the chairman of the Joint Chiefs explained to Congress that a no-fly zone in Syria would mean war with Russia. Hillary was full speed ahead. People have to understand who we were really dealing with here. I think the Democrats haven't faced up to the fact that they put up a candidate who was a warmonger and corrupt to the core.
Exactly. Yeah. So we ended up with the peace candidate. So we ended on a nice tone, and I enjoyed talking with Medea Benjamin, who is the director of Code Pink, and some of the speakers.
So I hope they'll think twice about protesting a president for peace, prosperity, and truth.
You said you gave information about 9/11 to Trump or to his aides. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. While he was on the campaign trail in Iowa, and you can see that on the Real Deal video that we put together. And when Donald finishes speaking, he goes along the front row and shakes hands. So if you go early to the rallies, you will have the opportunity to talk to him briefly and perhaps send him, give him something to sign. So I gave him a sign about Larry Silverstein with a photo of the World Trade Center tower exploding and in big letters, $4.2 billion. And when I gave it to him, he gave me kind of a nod and a thumbs up. I think he knows what's going on, and you may have seen the video of Donald on day one on 9/11 saying that the World Trade Center towers were rock solid and that there must have been explosives involved.
Right.
Those down.
He said it must have been bombs that the planes couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Rick, among the reasons I wanted you to call in or that you were there at the inauguration and witnessed that the crowd was packed all the way back to the Washington Monument, which puts the lie to the deception going on by the media to this day. I mean, just before I came down, I saw another use of a photograph before, all the crowd had come in. That's an easy deception to perpetrate. But also because I know you're involved in lobbying for 9/11 Truth in Washington, D.C., Could you take a minute just to tell us about your efforts?
Yes, and there is a photo by a Japanese news agency which has a wider angle and shows that there's a big crowd of people waiting to get in. So if you look around for that on the web, you'll see there actually was a very big crowd and a lot of people waiting to get in.
I'll look for that too. Tell me about ANETA, the Association for 9/11 Truth Awareness.
Yeah, Aneta is on K Street, 1629 K Street, and we're lobbying for a new investigation of 9/11. And an effort we have now is to encourage Donald to establish a Trump Commission. So we have a website reserved and ready for him, TrumpCommission.com and TrumpCommission.org, to do a new investigation of how those towers came down. And since he's into construction and he knows that towers are built strong, and I had the opportunity at a press conference in Oskaloosa in July 25th in 2000.
Now, Rick, if people want to learn more, they should go to www.aneta.org. That's Association for a New for 9/11 Truth Awareness. ANETA.org. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, also
I want to thank you for calling in. Calling in, Rick.
All right.
Is there anything you'd like to add by way of pardon?
Yeah, there is coming up is our 4th annual 9/11 physics debate on Einstein's birthday, and Dr. Stephen Jones will be speaking, and we use as a Hirsch index. We use as a criteria the Hirsch index of at least 10. And by the way, I think when we last talked, your Hirsch index was 26, and now it's up to 28. And your citation to your research has increased from 2,327 to 2,987. So congratulations on that.
Well, Rick, it was wonderful you had me do that because you suggested it years ago and I thought it might have no significance, and I found myself in a debate with someone who was rather pompous physicist and, wanted to know my Hirsch index, thinking I didn't even have one. So when I explained it was 26, I don't know, he just shut up and stole away. Yeah. Now you're telling me it's 28. Well, that's 28. Great. I love it, Rick. Yeah. Well, look, good luck with...
maybe we could have another talk. There was a reception with the Iowa senator. I had a chance to shake hands and talk with Senator Grassley, Joni Ernst, Governor Branstad, and Congressman King. And I asked Senator Grassley, I thanked him for supporting Senate Bill 1471 to release the 28 pages. And now that's been done, I suggested to him maybe it's now we have the opportunity to investigate that phony birth certificate. So, that's a done deal.
And I have a new book on 9/11, right? America Nuked on 9/11, Compliments of the CIA, the neocons, and the Department of Defense and the Mossad at Moonrock Books.
Oh, great. Okay, I'll watch
Check it out at Moonrock Books.
It was a great week, and my wife and I really enjoyed going to the inaugural balls and the festivities. There was a nice concert on Lincoln Memorial. I have a YouTube of that if people want to see. And the best fireworks I've ever seen, even timing it such that it spelled out USA, is amazing.
Rick, I want to thank you for calling in, my friend. www.aneta.org, right, Rick?
Yeah, and my YouTube channel is Truth Makes Peace. The lies make war, but truth makes peace.
Your YouTube channel is truthmakespeace.org or
right.
.com?
After youtube.com, put / Truth Makes Peace.
Truth Makes Peace.
And you'll see the videos of the various Trump events and the Code Pink rally.
Terrific. Rick, thank you for calling in. Special thanks to Barb in Florida, Rick in D.C., Mike in New York, and to all of you for listening.